Firefighters give everything to their communities. At firehousefurniture.com, we make furniture worthy of that sacrifice. Durable, comfortable, built to last. firehousefurniture.com.
There are two things firefighters dislike: the way things are, and change.
Sometimes traditional ways clash with the need for change.
That's where we come in.
Slicing through the noise with insights that matter.
Welcome to Igniting the Shift Within.
Your launch pad to revolutionize the way you think and work
and lead.
Welcome to Igniting the Shift Within. I'm David Dachinger, and I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Lori Moore-Merrell to this conversation today. A little bit of background about her. She is a leading voice in fire safety and emergency response, having served as the U.S. Fire Administrator from October 2021 to January 2025. And under her guidance, the U.S. Fire Administration launched the innovative National Emergency Response Information System, otherwise known as NERIS, revolutionizing emergency response analytics. Also, she's a champion for wildfire management. She co-authored the Commission on Wildfire Mitigation and Management and delivered 148 key recommendations to Congress in 2023. Additionally, she founded the inaugural World Fire Congress in May 2024, uniting global fire officials for critical discussions on fire safety. And as a transformative leader, Dr. Moore-Merrell developed the Fire Service One Voice Initiative and a strategic plan for 2023 to 2027 to enhance fire and EMS preparedness. Previously, she led the International Public Safety Data Institute and made significant strides at the IAFF in research and data analytics. I know there's a whole lot more to that bio, but let's stop there so we can dive into this conversation. Dr. Moore-Merrell, welcome to Igniting the Shift Within.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you for having me, and I'm excited for the conversation today.
Fantastic. Well, let's focus first on your tenure as the U.S. Fire Administrator. Can you share some of the wins you had and how those are shaping your current focus?
Oh my, well, you just mentioned a couple of them. So obviously NERIS is at the pinnacle of that. Anytime that I talk about, wins or something that was able to be accomplished during my tenure at the USFA, NERIS is right there. So I'm excited about what is happening. They're currently onboarding departments across the nation. So just hit over a million incidents in the platform just before Christmas. So it is now moving at an exponential pace and building as more and more departments are onboarding. And as you know, just this past weekend, January 31, in FERS, our legacy system was decommissioned or shut down. So I'm not sure all the details of that, given that we're in a federal government funding situation right now, but InFirst was scheduled to be shut down on the 31st, and that makes NERIS our national data platform for the fire service. So that is front of mind for me, and one of the big wins, I would say, from my time at the USFA.
Yeah, and a huge one. For those that may not be familiar with NERIS, can you just touch on some of the highlights and maybe the differences between that and NFIRS?
Yeah, absolutely. So InFirst was designed for recording of the fire incident, right? That was its purpose. And that's how it was built. And to look at, item first ignited, the spread of the fire, loss, all of those sorts of things, which are really important. As it evolved over time, and it was actually set forth in about 1976. And so as it evolved over time, or I should say as the fire service evolved over time, InFirst became less and less capable of keeping up with the innovation that was happening and the types of calls to which firefighters were responding. So it was beyond fire, obviously, the calls that we made. And so a fire database or fire incident database was not sufficient to be able to track and to keep up with that. And so there were several Band-Aids that were put on InFirst during the years. For example, in 1995, the EMS module was added. And so recognizing that fire-based EMS was a reality, we had to begin to understand the impact of that on the systems. And then in 2000, InFirst was made web-based. And that was about the last time that it was, there were patches after that, right? And the data list was updated from time to time, adding additional variables into the data list, which made it, larger and larger and larger. So there was never really a grassroots, let's really fix the system. It was more of a Band-Aid approach. Let's add, let's add, let's add. Right. And so that made it completely unwieldy. And firefighters, I can't find one that actually liked entering data into that system because it was like a task they never got any reward from. And so we never really taught the appreciation of data because we had no data set that really assisted with intelligence and operational decision making. And so one of the things that during my time at the IFF, I came really to understand the importance of data around operational decision making, around budget. You have to produce evidence of value, need, right? If you need resources and to be funded, we can't keep the traditional, we've always done it this way and expect that that's going to be enough. And so over time, we began to understand that INFRS could not provide any of that. And so researching and looking at the INFRS capability, looking at the INFRS legacy data and analyzing that data in light of what was needed. And almost nothing was provided that was needed. We knew when firefighters were dispatched, we may have response time, and we knew when they went back in service for another call or available for another call. We had no idea what happened in between those two times on scene. And so how do you show value if all you have is how fast you got there and what happened and reported as fire loss? So we had real, deficits in being able to talk intelligibly about our value, the fire service value to their communities. And so that's the real stark difference. And the premise on which NERIS was built is that it has to be a data fusion platform. If data already exists, why are we asking firefighters to put it in and adding that element of human error potential to the data set, right? And so if I can leverage data that exists, and that's what we did with NERIS, and the concept and the vision was to pull in data from multiple sources and really have it put together and then mine that data for intelligence that can be now operationalized. It can be used in the moment. So and used for planning, right? Everything from station location to, how to move units around or what to dispatch or what an effective response force looks like or crew size in a different hazard levels within your community. And so it became imperative that we build something new. And that's what this platform is. So NERIS is not a database. NERIS is a data platform that analyzes near real-time information and delivers it back to fire service decision makers in near real time.
You're talking about the evolution of the fire service, and NERIS is a big part of that. What other ways have you kind of observed the fire service adapt to these evolving changes that we've seen in our lifetime, while they still stay true to that core mission of delivering service?
That's a really great question, David. So how do we evolve and yet maintain who we are? And I think that's a challenge with us as individuals. It's a challenge with us as an industry, as the fire service. What we are confronted with is an evolving threat base. In other words, our risk and the types of calls that we respond to over time have changed. We are no longer just responding to fire and EMS and hazmat. Today, we're evolving. The risks are evolving to be much more threat-based. We have societal impacts that are driving call volume. We have an influx of people and population migration, people moving around. We have multiple families and single-family, homes. We have people who over time, they don't have healthcare, perhaps they get sicker when they call. Now you're dealing with something totally different than it would have been if they had had opportunity for healthcare. So there's a lot of things. And then we have the whole climate impact. And so what we see around extreme heat, we are making and having, triple digit temperatures in which our people are operating, but so is everybody else living in these temperatures, working in these temperatures. And so we see that in the extreme temperatures, but also in the cold. We can do the same thing on the cold side, extreme cold that lasts for days on end. And so these drive call volume because of the way that people have to interact with those extreme temperatures. And then you have the climate that is causing extreme drought. We have these severe storms that are far beyond things we've seen in the past. atmospheric rivers and, hitting California. We have these wildfires that are really approaching communities that have been built in the path of fire and fire-prone land. And now we have wildfire that leads to conflagration. And the conflagration now, because of the structure-to-structure fire spread, because of the overall fuel load, these fires, like we saw in LA just, a year ago, are outpacing and overwhelming firefighters. When you can put 12,000 firefighters on a fire ground, and the fire and the wind speeds of 100 miles an hour and the ember cast and all of the multiple ignitions, it outpaces even that kind of capability. And so today we must realize what is happening and the evolution of the risk to which we're responding, the evolution of the fact that everything around us is changing, from society to climate to all of these factors. If the fire service doesn't adapt, if we are not innovative, if we don't embrace new technology as tools, no technology is going to replace the firefighter and the human decision making. We still have to have that, but we need new tools that can make us more innovative, that can get us ahead of the game, that can match the risk to which we're responding. And this is key. So we have to think broader than we thought before. We have to think that we are now facing things that we haven't faced before on scales or orders of magnitude beyond what we've seen in the past. Wildfires are no longer just wildfires. Now they're influencing entire communities. They're vegetative. Yes, they're in the interface. And yes, they're in communities. And so we have to be prepared to respond in all three environments. And so that's just a little bit of what is going on around us and why we have to continue to adapt in the fire service.
Well, just to continue on with that topic of wildfire, talk about wildland firefighting and the impact of staffing and retention, recruitment, and resources, as those are all got to be hot topics, no pun intended. What steps can we take to kind of make sure that we are, staffing properly, retaining the people that are already on the job, and fully outfitting the units that need to do this response?
As I just said, these wildfires today are not typical as we might define typical of 10 years ago. They're happening in the off season of wildfire season. They are the scope and scale and where they're igniting and where they're spreading has changed. Mm-hmm. So we too have to understand that our capability to respond to these types of events must change. The firefighters and the staffing proposition is even greater than it was. I remember 10, 20 years ago when we were still talking about NFPA 1710 and trying to understand what minimum crew size was. What is the optimal crew size? What is the minimum? It's the floor, right? We cannot go below this for a low hazard dwelling, for a single family low hazard dwelling. And then we looked at it for medium hazard, and we looked at it for high hazard, right? What is that minimum crew size if I am on an engine that is in a particularly high risk first due area? Nobody's coming for 6-8 minutes to help me. What does my staffing need to be? Or if I've got multiple stations and we're in suburbia and it's single family dwellings and I've got stations within 4 minutes, 6 minutes of each other that can respond and inform this effective response force, then my crew size might vary. 4 is the minimum, in the urban environment, urban core, where you're going to be alone for a minute. 6, right? If you're in geographic restriction and all of those sorts of things. So all of these parameters around how we design a response matter. And this informed intelligence that can help decision makers know what is the optimal staffing, the optimal deployment of resources that I can get an effective response force on scene is absolutely key. So we have to know that we've got a staff for the risk to which we're responding. So I mentioned the structures because that really is the argument that's already happened. We have 1710. We have low, medium, and high hazard crew size. We have the effective response force. We have the time perimeters in which they're supposed to arrive. All of those things matter, and they're science informed. What we're looking for now is the wildfire equivalent of that. What does this look like when the scale goes beyond a single structure? What does it look like when a wildfire is approaching the interface? The interface now is a line of homes that if they are ignited, we're going to move to full-on conflagration in this community because of the structural separation, right, is limited, because of the building materials, may not be to code or may not be fire resistant. What are all these variables that come into play? So if I don't understand that risk, how can our decision makers possibly understand what we need to staff and how we staff our firefighters, particularly in communities that don't have good community risk reduction and they're not reducing that fuel load before an ignition? So all of these things have to be discussed when we're talking about proper crew size, proper deployment of resources, and an effective response force for the event at hand. And so I'm often having these conversations around a fire risk index. What does that look like? How do we provide some sort of risk assessment that is accurate enough to inform our staffing and our deployment capability? Because, and you've probably heard me say this before, we have to match resources to that risk. If we do not, when we respond, and we stay in response mode, right? We haven't gotten in front of it. And so the risk haven't changed. If we don't reduce risk, we still have to match our resources to that response, response resources to that risk. If we do not, we are vulnerable for firefighter injury and death, civilian injury and death, and property loss. This is a known fact, right? The more mismatch we have from a effective response force, equipment, training, whatever the variable of that mismatch is to that risk event, those are our vulnerabilities. And so this is where I spend a lot of time trying to explain to decision makers, the fire department, your stations, how they're trained, how they're equipped, their crew size, all of these things matter because of your risk environment. If you don't reduce it on this side of an ignition, you must be able to respond. And we have to respond effectively, or we continue to see the scope and scale of the events we have that are happening. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense, going from the structural environment and a single fire to these massive conflagrations that we're seeing in the interface and in our communities.
Yeah, very helpful insights. It's a whole different mindset, really, to respond to an incident of that size. Shifting gears, but kind of staying in that theme, I know you've been boots on the ground in some of these incidents, some of these wildland fire incidents. What are you seeing exist now in terms of resources for mental health and wellness for these extended incidents and deployments? And what do you think is still needed if it doesn't exist today?
That's a really great question, because my first inclination when you just asked that is not enough, right? So not enough. I'm not seeing enough. We're still not tracking exposures. We're still not effectively, right, tracking exposures on the fire ground. We're getting good reads on, when they come back in, particularly around LA. I know there was a lot of biologics that were gathered from the firefighters who've been exposed to the Palisades fires and all of the fires that happened over that period. So we're going to see some baseline exposures, but we're not getting them in real time. So we're having to get them out of blood and urine after the fact. On a mental health side, we've got resources out there. There are a lot that's been deployed, but again, what's the access? What is the capability for getting people help proactively rather than retrospectively? How do we build resilience on the front end? And I think that's where I try to advocate is, how do we build resilience to prepare our people before they're deployed, right? This is absolutely key so that they can depend on each other. How do we teach? There's a program in Australia called Are You Okay? And I love this because it's just so simple. It teaches you to have a conversation with your colleagues and just notice things. What are they saying? What are they doing that might be out of the ordinary? And just to take the initiative to say, hey, are you okay? And I know we do that sometimes, but being much more situationally aware of the people that we're working with and taking a moment just to ask, are you okay? So I encourage people to Google, are you okay, Australia? And read more about this program because it is active listening. It is noticing, again, what they're saying, what they're doing, how they're acting. Is it out of the ordinary? And taking a moment to invest in that person. And maybe just sitting down and having a coffee. Maybe it is having lunch. Maybe it's a phone call after the fact. So we talked this morning, how you doing now? Just checking in on you. It is investing in our colleagues in a way that is in real time. So these kinds of things I think are important. So that's pre and it's post of these major incidents. The thing that worries me around the wildfire space, and I say wildfire on purpose because I know in the wildland space, a lot of these deployments happen and they're out for weeks, days, weeks potentially. Are they eating right? Are they sleeping? Are they getting a shower? Probably not. I mean, so these kinds of conditions they wear on you. They wear on your physical resilience. So they have to wear on your mental resilience. So not enough. I want to see more and more in that space. And so getting them down to the baseline in the field is really important. But I think we also have to build that resilience on the front end, plus make sure there are resources post-deployment, during and post-deployment as well.
Great. Thank you for covering that. It's a fascinating topic, and I had the opportunity to speak with the clinician who does deploy on some of these large-scale disasters, really. And it's not just wildland, but sometimes it's hurricanes and other natural disasters. So it's good to see there's a trend now to start addressing by having someone there embedded with them. So we'd love to see more of that as well.
I love what you just said. I think getting people on the ground that understand, having somebody deployed with them. I wanted to see that kind of engagement with our USAR teams, right? Urban Search and Rescue teams with FEMA. So, our Urban Search and Rescue teams have to do some, horrible things. They have tasks that's not unlike our firefighters every day that have to do things that humans should not have to do and see things that we should not have to see. But I think embedding psychological resources, behavioral health resources, mental health resources with those teams is important because then you're there in the moment. You can, set sort of a base for that kind of engagement, that kind of conversation, right? That everybody's not pinning it up or holding it inside. And we'll talk about this later, right? It stays in the moment and it's okay, right? It continues to reduce that stigma around talking about what's happening right now. And so I think that's really, really important. So I like that mechanism.
Yes, and it puts another set of eyes on the crews who are working, who's got a maybe objective point of view to just make sure everybody's doing okay and have that conversation if they notice something's not looking correct. So lots of good bonuses to embed someone who's got those mental health skills. I'd love you to just talk about this. It's a great concept. It's the 3 Fs, and please let us know what they are and what's their significance in the fire service.
That's a great question. So that's how I remember my own and how I talk about my own, mental health and what things work for me. So I know that there are a lot of programs out there, and one of them, of course, is the IFF's Resilient Firefighter Program, and of course, their peer counseling. All of those things go hand in hand, and so this resiliency training that happens is so important. The NFFF, right, the National Fallen Firefighter Foundation, and the First Responder Center of Excellence also have incredible resources for firefighter mental health. So I encourage everybody to check out both of those resources. Really important that you see that. But both of them have conversations around what I call the 3 Fs. I won't say they call it that, but it is your, your faith, which, depending or relying on something greater than ourselves, right? For me, I have great faith, in the Christian perspective and my own belief system. And then family, really important that we have family connection. We talk about that connection, what we do. We might not get to share everything that we experience with our family, but staying connected and understanding that you can depend on family. And then friends. So those are my 3 Fs, and making sure that I stay close connected. So faith, family and friends. And I think that that is for me. I will check those periodically, right, and make sure that I'm maintaining them appropriately, because that is my basis. That's what I depend on, and that's my go-to for when I'm struggling, which is more often than you might think, right? We all have, you can be strong in what appears to be strong in the outset, but everybody who purports to be strong has something that is holding them up from the back. And I think that those three things for me are really important.
Thank you. So one last question, because those that may not know about it or haven't heard much about it, I think it's something really notable and important to discuss, and that's the World Fire Congress. For someone that has no idea what it is or what it does, could you just give us like an overview and talk about your role with it?
Absolutely, happy to. So, the World Fire Congress, it was a vision that I had in 2023. I was traveling, doing some global engagement with my counterparts in other nations, just trying to learn from each other, sharing knowledge. What can we do for training? Can we share education? In fact, in the USFA's legislation, there is a section in the 1974 Fire Prevention and Control Act that talks about foreign exchange of information and knowledge and education, right? So it was under that premise that I really tried to stand up something that could be sustained. And so for me, that vision was what I ended up calling the World Fire Congress. And that Congress was really put in place in May of 2024. We held the inaugural Congress that I got to found and co-chair at the time. And so really was excited to be able to lead that and kick it off in the U.S. Since that time, it is now moved to the UK. And so this year in September 7 through 9, actually, will be the World Fire Congress, the second one, being hosted by the UK. So they had agreed, and I had that agreement before we held the first one, because I didn't want to just do something that was a one-off. I wanted to make sure that it was something we could build that could live. And so the UK will host, and they'll continue conversations around climate, right? We just talked about some of the things that we're experiencing, how our risks have changed in the it's not just US, that's around the world. So we have wildfire, we have, flooding, we have all of these things that happen around the world. So we're not alone in that. So sharing knowledge in that is really important around lithium-ion batteries and the emerging technology fire risk, right? So this is not a U.S. problem alone. It is happening around the world. The same thing with firefighter health and safety. We are certainly not the only ones who had challenges with cancer and cardiac issues. And so what can we learn? And I will share that there are nations that are far ahead of us in some of that, particularly cardiac well-being for their firefighters. So there's something that we can learn in all of these spaces. And so the UK will carry on those conversations. And then in 2028, we will move to Dubai. Dubai Civil Defense will be hosting in the United Arab Emirates. So I'm excited about that. So, and we have 2 nations, possibly 3, that have already committed to 2030. So it appears that we started something in the US that will indeed live and be perpetuated by the nations around the world and the fire service around the world. So it is really excited. And I'm going to be continuing on to lead some of what we call the communities of practice. And so doing that global engagement, I will maintain that and making sure that between the Congress meetings, we are sharing information, we are exchanging, we're learning from each other, and we are lifting up and elevating the fire service around the world, which is what I had hoped to do during my tenure. The fire service one voice in the U.S., and now trying to move that to a global scale and elevating the fire service around the world. It's important. Firefighters matter. Our officers matter. And this is who I serve in my life. So I'm really excited to be able to continue in that space.
Well, that's amazing, and exciting is definitely the term for that. How cool is it to have that, it be part of creating that and seeing it move forward and evolve into what it's becoming. So kudos for all that. And thank you so much for spending this time and sharing all this knowledge and great innovations that you're bringing to the fire service. Much appreciated.
And thank you, David, for having me. And I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Join us next time to hear more from the game changers who are shaping our profession. You can check out our website, podpage.com/igniting. Make sure you like and follow Firefighter Nation on YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and firefighternation.com. Till the next time, stay safe, stay connected, keep igniting the shift within.
There are two things firefighters dislike: the way things are, and change.
Sometimes traditional ways clash with the need for change.
That's where we come in.
Slicing through the noise with insights that matter.
Welcome to Igniting the Shift Within.
Your launch pad to revolutionize the way you think and work
and lead.